What is up, boys and girls? Bannock13 here with a fresh new haircut and a fresh new look coming at ya. Now, in all seriousness, I've just cut my hair really short recently. Summer's upon us in Melbourne and it gets ridiculously hot, and the longer my hair is, the more maintenance it requires, and I just feel like a big girl. So I've cut it nice and short, and boy, is life so much easier. But maybe we'll do another video on that in the future. Right now, I'm here to talk about my build. So what I'm going to talk about is the Unhallowed Essence monster of a multi-shot fire build. You guys are going to love this. You will absolutely melt down enemies, monsters, mobs, whatever you're doing. Anything on Torment 10, whether you're farming acts, bounties, or just doing Nephalem Rifts, this is the build for you. It's not ideal for greater rifts at the moment, this setup anyway, but the ideal setup for greater rifts is very similar to what I'm doing, with just a few survivability tweaks and a few other options and a few other variations. But we'll get into that another time, I promise you. It is very similar, so I mean, even you can probably do the variations yourself and adjust it for your greater rifts, guys. Very, very easy. Anyway, before I start rambling on about other bullshit that makes no sense with Diablo 3, let's get into this. So let's start with our skills. All right, primary, we want evasive fire with focus for hatred regeneration. Our primary damage dealer is multi-shot with Arsenal. Now with Arsenal, you get fire damage and you also get some rockets. You launch multiple honing rockets, so that's extra damage as well. Vault for mobility and trail of cinders for a little bit of extra damage. Cal drops. Now this one here is quite optional. You can go with sentry, or you can go with a few other defensive skills, but I've gone with Cal drops just for that extra damage factor with bait the trap. So bait the trap is if you're standing in your trap, your critical hit is increased. Your critical hit damage is increased. No, not critical hit damage. Critical hit chance, I think it is increased. So it gives you a lot more damage when you're standing in your trap. And I find this to be the most handy for me, for my playstyle. Preparation with invigoration is really important. Now, basically, with Unhallowed Essence, the more discipline you have, the more damage you do. So once you fire up this bad boy with invigoration, your max discipline increases. And because our discipline's always practically going to be full, your damage will increase as well. So you're going to be just pumping out extra damage with each extra point of discipline. So this is really handy. And I'll get into some of the gear options with additional discipline as well. Companion with Wolf Companion for extra damage. So I unleash these two bad boys simultaneously. It's really handy when you're coming into an elite pack or fighting bosses, something like that. Activate these two bad boys, stand in your Cal drops, and that damage, you will just melt down anything in front of you. It's awesome. And these are all just damage. Now let's get into our passives. Awareness for survivability. As Demon Hunters, if you guys play Demon Hunters, you know that we take a shit load of damage. So this is really important. It will save your life on more than one occasion. Cull of the Weak. So this increases damage against slowed enemies by 20%. Now, you're wondering how enemies will be slowed? We'll get into this shortly. Ballistics for extra rocket damage. So basically that will be your Arsenal honing rockets, extra damage, and you will be spamming multi-shot a lot. So this definitely goes hand in hand. And ambush, gain 40% additional damage against enemies above 75%. So a big burst in damage to new enemies that you come across. Now back to Cull of the Weak. So another reason I choose Cal drops is because as you vault out of enemies, as you're damaging them and they go into Cal drops, they're slowed. All right, so it activates Cull of the Weak, and again, you're doing extra damage to enemies. All right, I think I've covered pretty much everything there that I can think of. Let's get into gear, boys and girls. All right, so Unhallowed Essence, obviously we want our shoulders, dex, vit, resistance to elements, and most importantly, make sure that you reduce all resource costs on shoulders. Very, very important, by 8%. The helm, we want crit damage and dex, and increased multi-shot damage by 15%. So I've been lazy, I haven't re-rolled 15 yet, I'm on 14. The amulet, get a Hellfire Amulet with 20% fire damage, and also we want Dex, crit damage, crit chance, whatever you can get. My one's pretty crappy right now, but hey, what can you do? I'm just dealing with it at the moment. I will get a better one at some stage. Our first gem, might as well get into it now, is Bane of the Trapped. Now with Bane of the Trapped, it increases damage against enemies that are slowed by 30.60%. It also gives you an aura that reduces the movement speed of enemies within 15 yards. So again, you're slowing down more enemies just by having this gem in a socket. So that's another way that you're slowing your enemies, not just with your cal drops. Your chest piece, like Dex, Vitality, all that sort of stuff. Most importantly, make sure that you roll plus 12% maximum discipline, all right? Like I mentioned before, every extra point of discipline is extra damage, so it just keeps multiplying. I mean, this is another 12 points of discipline. When you activate your preparation with invigoration, your discipline just goes up sky high again. So wherever we can, get your extra discipline. So definitely a chest piece. Make sure that we get plus 12 max discipline. Wraps of Clarity for your wrists with fire damage, Dex, Vitality, crit chance, all that sort of stuff. Your belt, very, very important, Hunter's Wrath. So your primary skills attack 30% faster and deal 60% increased damage. All right, so this goes perfect with multi-shot. Again, make sure you get your Dex, Vitality, resistance to all elements, and everything else that's critical to you and your playstyle. Gloves, we want Dex, Vitality, crit chance, and reduce all resource costs. Obviously, critical hit damage would be ideal here. I like Vitality because as Demon Hunters we die a lot. But most importantly, make sure that you roll reduce all resource costs on your gloves as well. This is huge for this build, resource costs. Because we're spamming multi-shot all the time, this is your primary damage dealer. We want to activate it, use it as much as possible, and not find ourselves without a lot of hatred. So very important. Focus and restraint here. Now with focus and restraint, we want to go for Dex, critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and most importantly, reduce all resource costs as well. But after reduce all resource costs, we want crit hit damage and crit chance, probably before dexterity. Make sure you go for those two stats. I haven't had the perfect drops yet for my restraint and focus, but hey, still waiting. All right, so definitely reduce all resource costs by 8% if possible, and then go for crit hit damage and crit hit chance, and then finally dexterity. The two gems that we use in our rings are Zay's Stone of Vengeance. So basically damage you deal is increased for every 10 yards between you and the enemy you hit. So huge. As obviously a Demon Hunter ranged class, this is huge for us. A big damage boost, and also 20% chance on hit to stun an enemy for 1 second. So again, this is another way that we're activating our slow extra damage against slow enemies. So it all goes hand in hand, it all makes a difference, and Colour of the Week comes into play with Bane of the Trapped. It's all extra damage against enemies that are slowed. Bane of the Powerful I've gone with. This is a bit more optional, but I've gone with Bane of the Powerful. Basically gain increased damage for 81 seconds after killing an elite pack. Obviously you want to level up your gems, but mine aren't that overpowered at the moment, but make sure you level yours up. And it also increases damage against elites by 15%. Alrighty, your pants, same goes, dexterity, vitality, and the best we can roll here is probably increased evasive fire damage. So nothing really crash hot with the pants. Now, Yang's Recurve, very, very important, the #1 weapon for this build. I've just recently got an Ancient set, as you can see. With Yang's Recurve, make sure that you've got that secondary plus 12 maximum discipline, all right? Must have it. I've got plus 11 at the moment. I haven't decided whether I'm going to get rid of the vitality and go with another damage dealing stat, or whether I'm going to roll plus 12 discipline. It'll be pretty silly to re-roll 11 for 12 just for one extra discipline, but either way, I'm going to play around with my weapon a bit later. You make sure that you have at least 11 or 12 maximum discipline on your secondary stat for your Yang's Recurve. Again, as I said, extra discipline is extra damage. We'll go with that now. Hellwalkers, dexterity, vitality. resistance to all elements, and make sure that we go increased multi-shot damage for your Hell Walkers, for your boots. So helm and boots, make sure we got increased multi-shot damage, and that goes hand in hand with this build and with this set. And Dead Man's Legacy, you know, no brainer. Make sure that we have 12% maximum discipline again. So all this max discipline, it's just adding up to our damage. Bang, 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 bang. It's just all this discipline. Once you activate preparation, like I mentioned, just stacks up and you just melt monsters. So make sure we got plus 12 max discipline, and with this quiver you get multi-shot that hits enemies below 59% health twice. So huge damage. Alright, so I think I've covered everything with our gear here. What I'll do is now, with your Templar, again, like I mentioned, slowing your enemies is really important to activate that gem and the passive Colour of the Week. What you want to do is, with your Templar, make sure that you have a relic with Follower Cannot Die. Then you want a Thunder Fury. Thunder Fury with your crit hit damage green gem. Now, basically with Thunder Fury, this stacks with Intimidate. So obviously you want to choose Intimidate to slow down your enemies that the Templar hits. But as well as slowing down enemies that the Templar hits, with Thunder Fury, the lightning that passes through other enemies gets slowed as well. So as you're dealing your damage, this is all increased damage to slowed enemies. Alright, so as you can see, as I've slowly progressed through my explanation with this build, everything kind of relates to enemies being slowed and those passives and the gem. Alright, so it's very important to slow your enemies and have those passives and the gem there ready to go to make the most out of, you know, damaging your enemies, oddly enough. The rest of the gear is pretty personal, with personal preference, I'm trying to say. Can't even talk. But what I like is the Dovu Energy Trap. Basically, it increases duration of stun effects by 21%. So you, again, with this stun effects, the Templar, that whoever he stuns, it increases the effect for a little bit longer. So as you're dealing damage, there's more of a chance that you'll hit him for that extra damage. Alright. So we've gone through that, and finally, I think I'll go through Paragon Points. Basically what we want with core is get your movement speed up to 25%. As you can see, I don't have any bonuses on my gear, so I've gone for full 25% here, and then we'll just go the rest in dexterity. Simple as that. Offense. We want to start with critical hit damage, then we go critical hit chance, followed by cooldown reduction, and then attack speed. But again, cooldown reduction is important in this build. What's crucial is that resource reduction. In defense, we want resist all, then we'll go armor, then life, and then life regen. With utility, we'll start with resource cost reduction. Obviously, as I mentioned, number one most important for this build. Area damage, and then life on hit. All right, and finally, gold find. That doesn't mean shit. So that's pretty much it. Now what we basically do, so as you can see, as I'm holding down multi-shot, it's my resource reduction is just killing it. I hardly have to use my evasive fire. But what you want to do is at least hit evasive fire every 5 seconds for that proc of Wraps of Clarity, alright? So you're not taking as much damage. So as we go around, you can pretty much hold it down. Then we hold down the, we put the cal drops down. I'm just holding multi-shot, and look at my resource, it's hardly going down. So every 5 seconds or so, hit that evasive fire to activate Wraps of Clarity. You probably won't even need it because you'll just be melting down through everything. And that's pretty much how we go. Obviously, I'm not going to leave it there. I'm going to leave you guys with an awesome example, a playthrough demo. So any other questions you might have? I'm just having a quick think, make sure there's nothing critical that I haven't covered here. You know, all the time, every time I do a video, once I finish recording and post it, it's like, oh shit, I should have mentioned that, I should have mentioned this. And I did almost forget something critical, something really important, and that is Kenai's Cube. Kenai's Cube is really important, guys. Make sure Whatever you do, make sure you have Calamity in that weapon slot. There is nothing that can compare to Calamity. Basically, with Calamity, any enemy that you hit becomes marked for death. Marked for death is a lot of extra damage, so this is huge. No comparison. Make sure it's there. Same goes for Syndicote. Syndicote reduces the resource cost of your multi-shot, all right, of your fire skills. So basically, resource reduction of 30% is huge again, and that's what allows us to just keep spamming that multi-shot like we do. Lastly, Convention of Elements, all right, for some extra damage as well. Very, very important. Make sure you got those three there. Convention of Elements, if anything, is probably the one you can sub out and you can, do your own variations with. Obviously, we'll go with Unity for greater rifts, but we'll talk about that another time. But make sure you got Calamity and Syndicote at the very least. All right, boys and girls. So I'm going to leave you with some gameplay and a bit of a demonstration of how this build works. Give it a go. Try some variations of your own if you like. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. And make sure you come back. Make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you all again real soon.